welcome back to the Krueg Show, Friday edition, Niners Nation style. We normally do this on a Thursday, but Kyle was a little bit under the weather. Kyle Posey, the managing editor of Niners Nation, joins us every Thursday for a Krueg Show edition starring himself, talking Niners football. So we moved it to Friday. How are you doing today, Kyle? How's the cold? And it's late, early July. Today's the first day of July. It sucks to get the summer cold.
Yeah, rough timing, with the long weekend, but I think I'm doing better. I think it's probably just being cooped up inside a little bit too, I need to get some fresh air, so I think that helped yesterday.
Seriously, you're out there in the desert. What's July 1st in the desert like?
What would you guess the temperature is right now?
I would say 105.
105, that's actually a pretty good guess. It is 106 where I am at right now, but I feel like that's coming down. Tomorrow, it's probably going to be like 113.
Oh my goodness! Now, I don't even know if I've ever been in 113. When it's 113, I mean, what bugs you the most about the heat? Is it the extremes when it gets to like over 110, or is it like nighttime when it's probably still 100, or nighttime when it's still 98 or something? Because you're not from there, right? Where'd you grow up?
So that's a good question. So I grew up in San Diego. I went to high school in Iowa. To answer your question, it's definitely at night because you still can't do anything when it's 102 and it's 9 o'clock at freaking night. Like, you just want to sit outside on your patio, have a good time, man. And you're still sweating. You're still swatting bugs away because they're not going anywhere. So definitely the night for sure.
Well, let's get into the 49ers. We were just talking before we went live about the story with Schefter and Jimmy Garoppolo. Fill us in on the angle, and let's get into that discussion a little bit.
Yeah, so his agent, Don Yee, just recently relayed something to Adam Schefter, basically talking about, he's going to be ready to throw, and, this and that, all the positivity that comes from something when you don't hear about a player. But what he really said that really caught my eye was the 49ers went back, watched Jimmy Garoppolo. And this is on national TV, on ESPN, by the way. The 49ers went back, rewatched Jimmy Garoppolo over the season, and felt like he was better than they previously thought. He sang this at the end of June. He sang this a half a year after the season, pretty much a half year after the season's been over. Where was this at in December? Where was this at in November? Where was this at when they were like struggling to score points, man? Like, why are we doing this dance now? And of course, it's because, Jimmy needs a job. They're trying to, whether it's trade, whether it's get teams interested in Jimmy. It sounds like Schefter is just being a mouthpiece for the agent, but it's so ridiculous that we do this. And people are starting to see through Schefter. But like, if you were to hear that segment live of what I just said, like, what would your initial takeaway be?
Now that I kind of I thought it was something even newer than what I actually did see. That was a couple days ago that Schefter came out and he's like, yeah, the 49ers, after reviewing the Jimmy film, have decided that he was better than they thought, but they're still trying to trade him. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, what happened to the first time? They didn't watch it closely the first time. It's only your quarterback. I don't know. I mean, obviously they're trying to move them, and who knows? I mean, I'm not sure what to believe. Do you believe that they had a handshake deal all worked out and that whatever the compensation was worked out months ago? Or do you think that they're still in negotiation mode, trying to negotiate for whatever's coming back in return? What's your guess on it sounded like, if we believe the stories that came out earlier, that they had a deal all wrapped up and that the surgery was the one thing that put that deal on the back burner. So do they just make the deal that they had set up, or is that deal off and now there's new teams, new bidders, new offers pulled from the table? I mean, it's hard to put your arms around this this thing because we've been, expecting this for months and months and months. And yet now you got a quarterback with an injured shoulder and a thumb and this, it's like, who knows what the correct value is? It's all based on supply and demand to some degree, and also the desperation of any individual team. I don't know. What do you expect this deal is going to look like when it comes down? Or do you think there'll be a deal? Or do you think they'll ultimately release him?
Yeah, I think we're getting very close to release territory. Think about how many teams need a quarterback. Are the Seahawks really going to make a deal with the 49ers with their history being in the division? Probably not. We're pretty much down to the Panthers, who drafted a rookie, who have Sam Darnold. Do you want to, are you going to be willing to negotiate your just move some funds around to make Garoppolo fit on the salary cap? And what do you do with Darnold in that case? Because then if you do that, you probably have to find a way to move on from Darnold. The Browns are a sneaky team just because, who knows what happens with Deshaun Watson, and their other quarterback is Jacoby Brissett, assuming that Baker gets moved too. So every team that you bring up has asterisks next to them. So because of that, I think there's a good chance that he gets released. It's wild to say that out loud, thinking about where we were a year ago, where we were a half year ago, where we were during the regular season, because there's no chance they're going to release Jimmy Garoppolo, right? All we heard was they made the playoffs. Teams are going to come calling for a quarterback who helped them make the playoffs. And now here we are talking about probably not. Yeah, it's not looking great. I don't know, man. I think it's a long shot that they do end up trading for him. Do you remember way back when there were rumors saying that the Commanders were going to move their 11th overall pick for Jimmy Garoppolo? How far are we removed from that, man?
Well, and then you've had Kyle on the record saying we're not going to release the player. So now if they do release the player, doesn't he have to kind of reconcile that whole public statement? I mean, I don't know. Is that just something you say? Are people going to forget that he said that and conveniently just be like, oh, it's just something that he said way back then? Or are people going to kind of hold him to that statement? Hey, Kyle, you said you wouldn't release this player. Now here you are. It's July and you're on the verge of releasing that player. I don't know. I mean, are the 49ers willing to pay some of that contract down if that's part of the deal? If they, if that's, going to be make the deal easier? I don't know. They, would they be willing to do that? They definitely have a cheap quarterback room without Jimmy. You got Sudfeld and you got Trey on his rookie deal and you got Purdy on his rookie deal. You've got a very inexpensive quarterback room. I don't know. I mean, where are the Houston Texans in this mix? The Texans were the regime that drafted Garoppolo, and they have Davis Mills. Is Lovie Smith and Cesario, are they tied to Davis Mills and the development, or do they want a better quarterback? What happens with Deshaun's money if he gets suspended? Does it just all disappear, I guess, for the year? And then maybe the Browns have money if they can move Baker? Or would the 49ers entertain Baker? Or is that a non-starter? I mean, I don't know what to believe. Will the 49ers entertain Sam Darnold at any price, or is that a non-starter? Do the Niners feel like without Jimmy, they have in Purdy and in Sudfeld, they have their three-man quarterback room? Or would they be open to rehabilitating a Darnold or a Mayfield? And would you, I don't think Darnold's rehabilitatable. I think he's just a bad quarterback who throws a lot of picks and was surrounded by so much talent at SC that it was impossible to get a correct evaluation. I think he's a bust, and I wouldn't try to rectify. I wouldn't try to reclaim him or any kind of talent that he has. But if you said Baker Mayfield and he was willing to be there, I think Baker Mayfield struggles. I mean, the things I don't like about Baker Mayfield are his commercials to production ratio is a little skewed, right? He's gone too Hollywood, and then it seems like the injuries this last year. I mean, he played with so many injuries at the end of the year that it was like he wasn't even the player that you couldn't evaluate him at all. But if you could say Baker wants to be here and I think that might be attractive from the standpoint of you might be able to rehabilitate Baker, get him signed on a reasonable 2 or 3 year deal, and trade him in a year for something that might be even better than what you get for Jimmy. So I don't know. There's a lot of different ways they can play their hand of cards here, and there's a lot of different moving variables, and we don't have a lot of information. So we're all just kind of left to speculate. What would be your dream scenario involving the quarterback?
Obviously, a dream scenario is you end up moving on from Jimmy, you get a draft pick in return, and you don't have to take on one of these, I don't want to call them reclamation projects, because like, as you said, like Darnold, there's nothing to learn more about Darnold that we don't already know, right? Like, he hasn't been good in the NFL. He has worked under multiple people, and everywhere he's gone, it hasn't worked out. For Baker, I never thought he was like a high first round pick. So for him to go number 1, I believe that just never made sense, because you have to have the physical tools like Trey Lance does to even be talked about going that high. So if you have to take on Baker in return, for example, that would be just a disaster in my mind. And who knows what kind of cancer he would be in the locker room. We saw what he's done to like some of his Brown teammates and how his Brown teammates have reacted toward him. So I think it's just as simple as being able to get something in return. So if it were to get to the point where they have to release him, I feel like that would be a loss for the 49ers if they do have to cut Jimmy. Would you say that as well? Would they?
Yeah, I don't like the idea of releasing Jimmy. I mean, here's the factor. We're also focused on can Lance play or can he not play, that we're not we're not carrying any of these things out any further than that. We're so kind of caught up with that question that we're kind of paralyzed by it. Let's just say, for the sake of it, this conversation, that Trey Lance absolutely can play and plays well. Okay, so he's your number 1, and you don't have to worry about is he or is he not. He is. Okay, but let's just say he plays 5 games and gets hurt. And now your whole season with Bosa and Trent Williams and all these, they got a very talented roster. I mean, the 49ers roster, this list that I saw this week, that the Niners roster was not listed as one of the top 10 rosters in the NFL. You know what? I haven't studied all the rosters, but I would beg to differ. That's all I would say. I think their roster is pretty damn good when you really look at it top to bottom. I think they probably do have like a 7th or 8th rated roster. I think it's definitely a top 10 roster. And they definitely seem like a team that the window for the Super Bowl is open right now if the quarterback can play. So now let's carry that out. Trey can play, and for the sake of this discussion, he can play. And he shows us in the first month of the season that he can play. But now he's hurt. And now he's going to be out for, 7 weeks. Is the season go flush down the toilet because now you have to go to Nate Sudfeld for 7 weeks? Does the season get flushed down the toilet because suddenly you've got to go to a rookie quarterback who is Mr. Irrelevant and Brock Purdy for 7 weeks? And essentially they're in the same spot they were before. So I don't know. Do you need another quarterback in this mix? Or I'd love to know how Shanahan, let's just say outside of Garoppolo, feels about his quarterback room behind Trey. Does he feel like those guys can come in and win games? Or are they strictly developmental kind of guys and they're in the same spot they were before they drafted Trey?
Yeah, I would be
shocked. Or they're a one quarterback team.
So just thinking about how, I would think of it as a coach, or, just they would, knowing that the investment tied into Lance it's Lance or bust for me. So I'm probably not even thinking, oh, what if we get to that scenario? Obviously, you have guys on your roster that you would feel comfortable putting on the field or whatnot. But if Brock Purdy has to take a snap in 2022, things have gone terribly for the 49ers. Like there have been a lot gone wrong if that's the case. So I would say it's probably a lost cause season, but that kind of begs the question, right? Is that a reason why you maybe include one of the veterans or you pick up a veteran on the market if Lance does get banged up? Because, he had the finger last year before the season even started, before he even got to the regular season. And there's always the worry that, with him running, especially if Shanahan's just jamming him up the middle like he did in the last couple of starts, is he going to just, get nicked up, suffer some type of injury? So that's pretty terrifying to think about. But in my opinion, he's a big, strong guy. And I don't think he's going to take square shots, so I don't know that we have to worry about that too much.
I mean, can Lynch and Shanahan, I think Shanahan definitely could. I don't know about Lynch. Could they survive? Could they both survive another thrown away season? If the 49ers, let's say Sudfeld, because you're saying, hey, I'm not even thinking about Sudfeld. I'm not thinking about Purdy. Okay. But let's say Trey does get hurt and you got to go for 2 months with those guys. And those guys truly are like Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard. You just can't win. You just can't win games with those guys. And now you chalk up this year and you wind up finishing 7-10 or whatever it's going to be because your quarterback went down. Is everything going to be hunky dory in Niner land? They've already lost a couple of seasons to injuries. Can they lose another season to injuries and not have the heat dialed up on the regime?
And just to be fair to Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard, Brock Purdy, Nate Sudfeld, backups aren't supposed to win. Like, they're backups for a reason.
Yeah, and there's that too.
This is on the front office, right? So you moved on from a quarterback who struggled with injuries, and now in the first season starter, Lance is injured. That's on the front office for building this team. So I don't think they should get a pass for that at all, right? This is the whole point of moving on from Jimmy. Obviously, is you want to take your offense to another level, but you want to have a quarterback that will be on the field for all 17 weeks of the season. So, yeah, I don't think that there's any way that they should get a slap on the wrist for going through another season where the quarterback wasn't able to stay healthy. Do you agree with that?
I want to cut him slack because it's situational, and I do believe that Lynch has done some really good things with the roster, and I think that Shanahan's a top-tier NFL coach. So it's like, I don't really think I'm moving off of the regime. I'm pretty sold on the regime. But, man, this would be a huge kick to the gut if the 49ers and their fans had to endure another lost season due to quarterback injuries. And I know there'll be an awful lot of unhappy people. I don't know what the result would be. I don't know what the action would be, or if there would be any action, or if we'd all just have to kind of live with it. But, man, it would be, I'm sure it would be depressing for the Trent Williamses of the world who last year got one win from a first playoff appearance and one win from a Super Bowl, and now you've got another wasted season in the prime, the late prime of your career, arguably the beginning of the twilight, let's say, of your career. I don't know.
Deebo, just assuming he just signs an extension. Hey, now you got to go catch passes from Nate Sudfeld because Trey Lance is banged up for 2 months.
Yeah, that's the next thing I was going to get into. Deebo, it sounds like he demanded a trade. He never rescinded his demand for a trade. It seems like there's several indications that he's happy. Lynch has made it perfectly clear he's going nowhere. Shanahan has made it perfectly clear in his mind he's going nowhere. What do you think this year's going to look like for Deebo? Do you think, A, he's truly happy with the 49ers and he just hasn't publicly rescinded his trade demand? Do you think he still would like to be traded, or do you think he wants to be here? And then how do they use him this year? Since he wasn't happy with his usage last year, how do they use him this year to make sure that he is happy with how he's being utilized?
Yeah, I think that's the kicker right there. Like, what do we see out of Deebo Samuel in 2022? And I think we're going to see a lot of his usage dialed back. I think we're going to see the ball spread out a little bit more just because they're going to be able to use the entire field. And I'm not saying that he's going to be an afterthought in the offense, because that's just not how this offense is going to operate. We saw how heavily he was involved last year, but let's say that he was involved on 50% of the plays last year. This year, it'd probably be cut in half to 25%. That's what I would imagine. So if he's, instead of getting 16 carries in one game, he might get 3 over the course of the season, spread out. As far as his receptions go, I don't know that he's going to come close to, like 100 receptions or maybe even like 70. So it'll be interesting. I think if anything, we're going to see an uptick in Brandon Ayuk's usage, and maybe that's going to take away from Deebo Samuel. And then, of course, you have the Ray McLeods, the Danny Grays, and maybe we even see more production out of the backfield from the host of running backs. So I think we're going to see a jumbled effort as far as the box score, where it'll be a new leader in the clubhouse every week, I imagine. I think it's going to be a headache for fantasy owners if you are following the 49ers this year. I guess that's the easiest way to put it.
It's such an interesting roster. The 49ers getting ready to go to camp in July. And there's, let's say 15 new players on both sides of the ball. 15 new offensive players, 15 new defensive players. Many are depth players, draft picks, undrafted free agents, guys who will be brought to camp with a chance to make the roster. I don't know if you caught this, Kyle, but they caught my eye. Scott McCloughan, former Niner executive, a guy who's got a pretty good eye for talent. He was asked about the Niners rookie class. And did you see the guy who he said that he's most excited to see out there, and the guy that he feels best about? Did you see the guy that he named?
No, I didn't. I would guess, knowing him, it's somebody in the trenches.
No, it was Tariq Castro Fields.
Holy smokes.
Scott McCloughan likes Tariq Castro Fields, the Penn State corner who the Niners drafted in the 6th round. He is the guy that he likes, Tariq Castro Fields, and thinks he's gonna surprise people. That surprises me, but it makes me enthusiastic, because when I watched Castro Fields, I didn't see anything and I watched all the film I could find on him from Penn State. Then I watched what he looked like at the Senior Bowl and the practices, and I had actually recorded all of those practices, including the game. And I went back and looked at all the practices, and I saw a number of times where he was doing one-on-ones with the receivers. I didn't see anything I necessarily disliked about Castro Fields in any of the film that I watched. And at the end of the day, I thought he looked like, maybe a late 3rd, early 4th round pick, maybe a late day 2, maybe an early day 3 guy. Instead, he goes late on day 3, and McCloughan says he's the rookie that he's, most excited about. I mean, I have so much respect for McCloughan's eye for talent that it makes me want to take a real close look at Castro Fields this summer.
So I watched him very early on in the process, like in March, and he was one of the first corners that I did watch. And you could see just like the raw talent. You could tell that he was an athlete. You could tell that he could run. You could tell that he had recovery speed. The more I watched, though, you could also kind of sense that he was probably going to be a day 3 guy. Like, he didn't have I would say the awareness and coverage that you would like to see from a day 2 type of defensive back. So yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting to see, to hear McCloughan say that. He must really like his upside. He must think that he could probably produce early. So whether that's special teams, or more than likely special teams as being a gunner or whatnot, making an impact in that sense. But man, outside of that, because to me, to be a dominant cornerback, to be a dominant DB, you have to be able to find the ball. And when that was, in my opinion, his biggest issue, was just turning and locating and, making a play when the ball was in the air. Generally speaking, you can't really teach that. So the 49ers DBs, the DB coaches have their work cut out for them with Castro Fields. But he could, learn that on the fly, perhaps. I don't know. That's definitely, if you were to put the list of draft picks in a hat, that would not be the name that I would have chosen. So,
I know, it shocked me as well. Who is the player entering training camp outside of Trey Lance that, in your opinion, has the most pressure to perform?
Man, I want to say, and this is probably isn't fair, but we talk about him, it seems like, every week. But Dre Greenlaw is entering the last year of his contract, and there's no guarantee that he's going to start. And we talked about them being able to trade certain linebackers, and they've done it in the past. So if he just kind of comes in and is middling, I guess he's on par with Azeez Al-Shaair. Maybe he's the guy that gets traded because he doesn't live up to the hype. So I would go Dre Greenlaw defensively, and then on the other side of the ball, I mean, it's probably got to be one of the running backs, right? So maybe it's Elijah Mitchell, maybe it's Trey Sermon. You don't draft a running back and feel confident about your job, right? They went out and drafted Ty Davis Price, and when that's the case, hey, we're putting you on notice, Elijah Mitchell. We're putting you on notice, Trey Sermon. So maybe they feel the pressure and they kind of go above and beyond what they're used to having to do. And who knows how they react to that. But I think both on both sides. So just because competition is going to bring the best out of you, and in this case, Ty Davis Price is going to be on the heels of both of the running backs. So it's up to them to kind of step it up and take their game to another level. What about you? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to go Aaron Banks at left guard, on the offense, just because second round pick, when you're a second round pick, you're expected to be a foundation piece. And Lynch has maintained that Banks is going to be a player, despite the fact that he couldn't really get on the field at all last year. So, Lynch could have had a tempered opinion or, kind of toned it down a little bit and said, well, we liked him at the time and now we're just going to have to see. He kind of doubled down late in the year and was like, Aaron Banks is going to be a tremendous player. And I'm not sure if that's an exact quote, but that was summing it up. He basically kind of voiced a strong opinion of confidence in Aaron Banks. So I'm looking at Aaron Banks saying, okay, Notre Dame, typically, they're well coached there. He's had a year to kind of learn the system. Now he's back at his left guard spot where he played in college, where he's comfortable. He's in better shape. If you believe Trent Williams, he's repositioned his whole body as far as he's lost some baby fat. He's put on some muscle. He's a much better athlete than he was a year ago. So on offense, I'm going to say Aaron Banks. And on defense, I'm going to say Javon Kinlaw, because I just think Kinlaw has the ability. There's just no doubt in my mind. I mean, he's strong. He holds the point of attack. He's so strong that you have to combo block him. He can split that combo block and still make an impact. But he's had the knee problem. Now he's always had DJ Jones there, where it's like, okay, Kinlaw, you look like a world beater, but you know what? If you can't do it, we got Eric Armstead and DJ Jones to plug inside. Now, if you look at the way the D-line is kind of structured, it's Bosa and Kinlaw and Armstead and probably Ebukam is your ones. But then you look at the backups at tackle. There's Kerry Hyder, and I don't know that Kerry Hyder is an every down guy. He's got to be playing in a rotation. He's definitely not a run stuffer. Mo Hurst is more of a gap shooter. Kevin Givens doesn't hold the point of attack. He's a little bit more of a gap shooter. Kalia Davis may be on the PUP list, so he may not even be leaned on. Kevin Atkins from Fresno State's an undrafted guy. And then there's Hassan Ridgeway, who comes in from Philly. So to me, there is the lack of DJ Jones has put a lot more pressure on Kinlaw to not just play, but to play well and to play well against the run. So I think Kinlaw on the D and Banks on the O are the two guys that I think have a lot of pressure, because if Banks plays well, that's going to help this offense tremendously. If Kinlaw plays and plays well, they may not miss DJ Jones. But if those two guys don't play or don't play well, that could be, those could be the two spots that they invest in next year's draft. So it's to me, those are the two guys. What do you think of my two?
Well, I want to ask you about Banks, and how do you, maybe this is more of a John Lynch question. How do you feel about a GM going out of his way just to hype up a player? Because in Banks' case, we don't know anything about him. Like when I say that, I mean on the football field, nobody knows what to expect from him unless you saw him practice last year, which we didn't. And then B is just because, why put that type of public pressure on him to say that he's a tremendous player, to go out of your way to hype a guy up who didn't play last year? And from our point of view, it's like, hey, he couldn't beat out like Daniel Brunskill. Are you sure? Are we supposed to believe that he's this fantastic player? So what do you think about John Lynch? What is he trying to do here?
Well, I think he's trying to take some heat off of himself. I mean, I think everybody's looking around going, hey, Aaron Banks was a second-round pick, John. You made the pick. You're the general manager. This is your guy. He can't play a lick. And John's saying, hey, wait a second. He didn't get out there, but we still have tremendous confidence in this kid's future. We think he's got a great NFL upside. And that comment from John, I think, kind of tempers the criticism, or at least mitigates some of the criticism that's coming his way, and at least delays it until this summer. So, I think he was starting to feel the heat at the end of the year when people started noticing not only that Banks wasn't on the field, but he wasn't even active on game days. So I think it was Lynch pushing back saying, hey, look, kind of like when Brian Sabian made the trade for Matt Williams and he said, hey, I am not an idiot. It's almost like Lynch's I am not an idiot moment where he comes out and says, you know what? I know Banks isn't active and I know he's not playing and I know it's deferred gratification, but I'm not with everybody who thinks this kid's a bust. I think he's got a great future, and I still think he's got a great future. So I think it pushes some of the criticism away and says, hey, I still believe in this guy. I haven't lost any confidence in him. And it also challenges the player to up his game. I'll say this, Banks in the mini camp was sweating like a dog. I think there's some conditioning still there that needs to be done. I mean, he was just in a full lather when most of the guys were not sweating like that. Now, is that because he's a bigger man and this is a movement-rich scheme? Maybe. Is that because he's running with the ones? Maybe. Is that because maybe he just showed up, maybe he's more out of shape than maybe some of the other guys? That's possible. I mean, ultimately, when they put the pads on in July, the proof's going to be right then and there. And I think in some ways, Kyle, Lynch has a couple of options here because, will he be criticized if Banks can't play? Yeah, probably. But he's kind of got a 2-for-1 going because I think Spencer Burford doesn't have the weight issues. He's also trying to transition to the NFL. We're looking at him as maybe a tackle, but I think Burford might be a left guard as well. So maybe between, if Spencer Burford or Aaron Banks step in at left guard and play at a high level, I think Lynch is fine. The only way Lynch is going to be criticized is if both of those guys show up in camp and neither can play and they're leaning on, I don't know who they would lean on, right? I mean, maybe Jalen Moore, maybe Nick Zakelj, something like that. But you invested a fourth in Burford and you invested a second in Banks. And to me, if you're Lynch, I've got particular interest in those guys because if both those guys can't play, there's going to be some explaining to do.
So you have a second in Banks, a fourth in Burford, last year, a fifth in Moore, this year, a sixth in Zakelj. One of those guys has to be able to play. That's essentially what you're betting on. This is you invested so many picks that you're hoping to hit on one of these. And I don't think it's a big deal first of all, you probably should be investing in your offensive line knowing that you have this prize investment at quarterback. But with that said, I think it's just a matter of one of those guys hitting. So it's not a big deal if Zakelj ends up being a starter, for example, then great. Just because, in Banks' case, if he's not ready, if he's not going to be a starter, I don't think that's a big deal because one of your other draft picks was able to beat him out. And then there's always going to be this thing where, we could have used a second round pick on another guy, but you can do that for any draft and for every round. So that's not really fair. I think it's just about getting the best guy to start. And if that's just so happens to be even an undrafted rookie, and if he comes out and beats out one of whether it's Banks, Brunskill, Moore, any of the interior guys, I don't look at that as a bad thing. I just think if anything, it should be reflected positively on their scouting department.
Couple topics that I loved from Niners Nation. If people go to Niners Nation right now and you check out the front page, there's an article written by Kyle. And one of them is, which NFL team would you root for if it wasn't the 49ers? That's an interesting question. What kinds of reactions did you get there? And if I turn that on you and said, Kyle, who's your non-Niner NFL team? If you got to root for one, who you rooting for?
So I grew up in San Diego. I grew up a Chargers fan. I grew up going to games. Like we used to watch, like Junior Seau, Rodney Harrison. Like those are the guys that I grew up watching. But once I moved from San Diego, it's like they're dead to me. So I don't think about them at all. I don't know. I think it's easy for me now to root for like players, to gravitate towards players. So I like watching like Bengals receiver T. Higgins. Like I love watching him play. I like Florida State fan, so I like Jalen Ramsey, Derwin James, like those kind of guys. So I don't know that there's a specific team. But what about you? Because you've been a diehard Niner fan. I'll pretend that they didn't exist. Who would you root for?
It's interesting. It's like it probably would come down to two other teams. My sister lives in Connecticut, and so my nephew, who I'm close with, is a big Patriots fan. So maybe I'd be a Patriots fan. I mean, I find myself rooting for the Patriots each week if they're not playing the 49ers.
That's
that
the dark
would be
side right there.
Yeah, I know. Seriously. So it's like, and that was the other comment. The other one I saw, did you see the quote? There was some quote that one of the NFL insiders had this week that the people in the Patriots camp believe that Mac Jones is going to be an MVP candidate this year, that his improvement from year one to year two is so significant. And they did add Devontae Parker at wide receiver. They're plugging in Cole Strange, their first round pick at left guard, next to Trent Brown. But Mac Jones, their backups are Brian Hoyer and Bailey Zappi.
That's his competition right there.
Any chance that Mac Jones improves so much this year that he's a legit NFL MVP candidate?
No shot. Think about everything that so you watched the Patriots last year. You know that Mac Jones really didn't have to do a lot.
No,
like they pretty much had the training wheels offense for him, and sure, he executed. He did what he was supposed to, but whenever you watch the Patriots, you didn't come away thinking like, "Whoa, this dude is going to be a star." If anything, I came away thinking like, this is who he's going to be for the rest of his career. Like, if anything, he's probably going to be like a Chad Pennington type who probably starts for a long time in the NFL, but he's never going to be a guy who throws for 40 touchdowns, 5,000 yards. I don't think that's his game. You're going to have to surround him with that Alabama type of talent. Whereas a guy like Trey Lance, I think he can be a guy who can carry teams. He can uplift a guy. He can make a guy like Danny Gray, Ray McCloud, and turn those guys into a player who can have a 100-yard game because of his arm. So, yeah, I think we're on two different spectrums there. And I would be very, very surprised if Mac Jones ended up being that way. How do you feel about that comment when I said I think we've already seen his ceiling?
I don't know, because the thing about it is he was a rookie, and the kid needs work on his body. All right, but so did Tom Brady when he came out of Michigan, and Brady did work on his body, and Brady became. I thought his arm strength was better after a few years, and his athleticism. He was a better athlete 3 or 4 years in than he was coming out of Michigan. And if Mac Jones works on developing his body and really, gets in great shape, then maybe he's a little quicker. Maybe he's a little more sudden. I'll say this about Mac Jones. The ball comes out on time with accuracy. Incredible accuracy. There's not a lot of pre-snap looks that seem to confuse him. There's not a huge upside as far as I don't see great arm strength, but Brady improved his arm strength. Can Mac Jones improve his arm strength? Brady improved his pre-snap recognition. Can Mac Jones through reps do the same? Brady moved, I thought, quickly within the pocket. He wasn't moving quickly outside the pocket, but can Jones adapt and work on his athleticism and his reps and move better and quicker and more decisively within the pocket? I don't know, but I will say this: if Mac Jones works on his body, he gets to be a little bit better of an athlete as far as gets rid of some of that baby fat, some of those bad pounds, and puts on some muscle, and knows the offense a little better, and there's no reason he should not improve from what we saw last year. I could see him improving. And if he improves on what he was last year, the ball came out on time and he was pretty accurate. So is his accuracy better? Does it come out more on time? Does he now advance to where he can extend plays by moving around a little bit? I'm eager to see what it looks like, because he was unlike most rookie quarterbacks last year. He did not look like a rookie. He seemed now late in the year he kind of did. I thought he kind of hit his ceiling in November and kind of topped out from there. But now maybe if he's in better shape, maybe there's more there. I don't know. He would have to improve his throwing the same way that Brady did, and that only comes through total dedication to diet and training. And I don't know, is Mac that kind of a guy? Is he that dedicated? We're going to find out, I guess.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head with just the diet part about that. But just talking about Mac, the positive side of him, like he's like pinpoint accurate. He can put the ball wherever he wants to, and knowing where to go with the football for a young quarterback is a big, big deal. And he showed that right away. Also playing on time, like he knows where his guys are and he knows when to hit them and how to hit them in stride. Defenses didn't really confuse him, which is nice. Which is other rookie quarterbacks cannot say that. Like they look like they were kind of in deer in headlights a lot of times last year. So Mac does have those going for him, but the physical traits, like that's what you want to see improve. And I think you're right when you said Brady's arm strength got better, because whether it's like 2006, 2007, like he was throwing lasers, like he was throwing balls on a line that he wasn't throwing earlier in his career. But again, that's when you have to compare somebody to Tom Brady, who is like the ultimate one-off. I'm not going to bet that that's going to happen.
What do you think of the division? We had a guy on from Las Vegas this week, and we were talking a little bit about the upcoming year, and we started talking about the over-unders, and we started going into individual teams. And when it got to Arizona, you look at the Arizona Cardinals, and I thought, well, I kind of like Arizona, and I like Kyler. But then, they're not going to have, how do you see this division this year? I kind of think Seattle is going to surprise people, and I think Arizona is going to surprise people in a bad way. And I say that because they're not going to have Hopkins at the beginning of the year. There seems to be a lot of smoke around Kyler Murray. And they've got kind of a little bit of a tougher schedule at the end of the year. They could play some cold weather games. To me, Seattle, everybody on paper thinks Seattle's going to be bad and that the Niners, Cardinals, and Rams are all going to be pretty good. I kind of think that I kind of have higher hopes for Seattle because I really like Kenneth Walker. I liked what I saw last year out of Rashad Penny. You still have Chris Carson. So they got a bunch of guys who can run the ball. And then they added Charles Cross at left tackle. They've got an improved offensive line. I like Damian Lewis. I like Gabe Jackson. So I really like Charles Cross. They've got good receivers in Lockett and Metcalf and Freddie Swain. And I kind of like their young corners. I mean, the fact they got Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant are big-bodied corners that if they can coach him up in the secondary, and Pete's a pretty good coach, that might be two of their top corners going forward. Both big corners too, and Bryant was the Thorpe Award winner, so. I don't know what exactly. I mean, there's no Russell Wilson, so everybody's thinking down year for Seattle, but I think the over-under number was too low on them and maybe a little too high on Arizona. I think Seattle's going to surprise and Arizona is going to be a negative surprise. How do you see the division?
Did you watch Bubba Bolden? The safety out of Miami?
I didn't see tons of Bubba Bolden in college, but I've heard some good things about him.
Yeah, so him and obviously Kobe Bryant, the Cincy guy, two safeties, big athletes who can run. So you have Jamal Adams, you have Quandre Diggs, who I think is a top 10 safety in the NFL. I think Quandre Diggs is very, very good. Yeah. They have a new defensive coordinator. I think they're going to be pretty good on that side of the ball. It's going to come down to the quarterback. And honestly, that's why people are tying Jimmy G to these guys, because everything you mentioned, if they just get the quarterback in order, they're going to be fine. That it seems like they shored up the offensive line. I think you hit it on the head with Rashad Penny. I think he has a chance to be very good this year. And I think just him and the 1-2 punch with Kenneth Walker will be probably, dare I say, the best running back tandem in the NFC West. Is that going to ruffle some feathers here? I think those two are pretty good, man. But again, I've seen Drew Lock throw the football, so I can't be too high on them. Knowing that he's
is it going to be him? Is it going to be Geno Smith?
That's a good point. Yeah, I would, if I'm Seattle, I'm rolling with Geno just because I think that he just gives my offense a better chance to score. Locke is so up and down, and when I say up and down, it's mostly down with like flashes of ups that there's just the ceiling just isn't worth it. But as far as Arizona goes, I think the number was like 9.5. I'm smashing that under. There's no shot they get to 9. Their offense revolved around DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is going to be out for 6 games, as you mentioned. What did they do? Like, who did they add this offseason? it was essentially nobody. They're hoping that J.J. Watt stays healthy. Remember, they were one of the best defenses in the NFL through 7 weeks, and then he got hurt, and then everything went down the drain. They didn't replace Chandler Jones. You don't lose Chandler Jones and then not replace him. Their secondary is still pretty shaky, and then Kyler's going to go essentially a half a season without having DeAndre Hopkins to bail him out. So we've seen it every year. Cliff Kingsbury starts out hot, and then the league figures him out, and then they go down the drain. And that's the same with Kyler if you look at Kyler's numbers too. So that now you don't have one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I don't think it's going to be looking too great for them. Even with the Rams, though, they lost a ton of people. The Super Bowl hangover is very real. I know that people like and they've heard the name Bobby Wagner, but I don't think that Bobby Wagner is the same linebacker that people like to think he is. I know he still gets votes for Pro Bowls and all pro stuff, but I think that's just people writing in the name because they know if you watch him play, I think there's a lot left to be desired in his case. So the division shakes up well for the 49ers. I think there's a good chance for them to not just compete for the division title, but they should be able to win it if Trey Lance performs up to what we think he's capable of.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be really interesting to see exactly what level Trey's at. I agree with you on Arizona's offseason, by the way. I mean, what did they do in the offseason? I mean, I like Trey McBride, the Colorado State tight end. So I think, that now they've got, a pretty dangerous 2 tight end set with Zach Ertz and Trey McBride. So I think that's going to be good. And they'll probably have to lean on that early. But I'm not a Hollywood Brown guy. And he's
not a number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, he just does not consistent. AJ Green's a little long in the tooth. Rondale Moore I like a lot, but he's on the smaller side. So you don't have, without DeAndre Hopkins, your offensive weapons are not stellar on the perimeter. And then I thought James Conner had an incredible year last year. What are the odds that he's going to be able to do that again? They lost Chase Edmonds. They don't really have a second back. I mean, Darrell Williams, Eno Benjamin, TJ Pledger from Utah, Ronnie Rivers, Jonathan Ward, Keontae Ingram. I mean, those are just a bunch of guys. So their O-line, nothing great to speak of. Their D-line's got some a little long in the tooth with J.J. Watt there. I do like Myjai Sanders from Cincinnati, and I do like Cam Thomas from San Diego State. So they did add a little bit of edge, rush. And Lucada's not a bad linebacker as well from Penn State. But I mean, it's not. They didn't add a lot to their football team, and I think Arizona's the underplay for sure. And the Rams, I don't know what to make of the Rams because I thought the Rams got away last year with the fact that they put a lot of money into the stars on their roster, so it's not the deepest roster. Now here we are a year later, and I think the Super Bowl hangover is going to be, as you said, real. I think it's going to be real for the Rams. So I like the Niners' chances this year, even with Trey Lance. I think their chances are really, really strong, but I do expect Seattle to be better than people think. The other question on Niners Nation that kind of caught my eye, what is your favorite regular season game in 49ers history? It was the question of the day. You put it up yesterday, I guess. Your favorite regular season game in 49ers history. I mean, for an old head like myself, my head is spinning with all kinds of games. But yeah, what is there one that stands out to you? So what was the reaction? What games came to mind when the fans started weighing in?
Yeah, so it's tough because when you think 49ers, a lot of their prestige just comes from the playoffs.
Sure.
Whether it's, the divisional game, the divisional round games, and obviously the Super Bowls. But regular season, you have a couple of Frank Gore performances, like the 200-yard game against the Seahawks. You have Cap's first start against the Bears because nobody knew what to expect. And he takes the field, and all of a sudden he's throwing far field comebacks. He's throwing deep corner routes to the tight end. He's scrambling and making plays outside of the pocket, outside of structure. And the whole time running, where the hell has this been at, man? Is this guy been hiding on the bench? That was a pretty popular one. The one that I always come up with is, and this is you will remember this, Garrison Hurst, that touchdown run at the end of
Jets.
Yep. I think it was the season opener, right?
Yeah. Yep. Got loose on the Niners sideline, down the sideline.
So that was people only bring up that run, but that game was pretty crazy in itself. Like it was 30-30, which a lot of games aren't 30-30 in the late 90s. And by the way, it wasn't Steve Young against Troy Aikman. This is Steve Young against Steve Foley. And this guy's lighting up the 49ers. And sure enough, after being pinned in their own end zone, you think that the 49ers are dead in the water. And Garrison Hurst gets the handoff, makes like a guy miss in the hole, makes another guy miss, stiff arms some dude into the oblivion, and then sprints down the sideline. And as he's sprinting down the sideline, you can see Terrell Owens sprint from like 40 yards away to clean up a block. Like that was just a really fun play. The pick of the stick was like probably the winner, just because I don't want to say recency bias, but it's the last game at Candlestick.
Yeah, and I was there. I was standing on the Niners sideline. Remember how the media used to come down and we'd be standing on the sideline right there on the Niners side by the end zone at the end of the game. And sure enough, Bowman ran right by me on that 89-yard pick six from Matt Ryan.
That was a pretty popular one. And for all the reasons that, a lot of people would mention, but they also clinched a playoff berth. Like that wasn't just a random game in December. Like that game meant something for the 49ers. So for that to be kind of a walk-off play, that was pretty cool. One of the guys that we said brought up New Orleans in 2019, just the back and forth. And there were trick plays in that game, kind of everything you want.
Yes.
There was a big play. Remember the deep ball to Emmanuel Sanders where Jimmy G threw the ball and it seemed like the ball was in the air for like 10 seconds and it finally came down. That was an interesting one. So it was all over. It kind of depends on when you were brought up, where you came from. It's funny that just because for the 49ers, you're going to have to skip different periods of time because they were just pretty bad for like 3 or 4 years, whether it's like the Erickson days or what have you. So we had some options though. And just as you said, man, there are so many games just when you think about it that they had. What would you narrow it down to?
Well, it's funny. 3 come to mind. Okay. I'm going to go with Niners, Eagles. Joe Montana gets his butt kicked in the first half and just throws some perfect dimes against, a defense that had Reggie White, Seth Joyner, Jerome Brown, Andre Muddy Waters. And, they're all kinds of, Philly was intimidating. That Buddy Ryan defense and the 46 front and all the heat, and they just whipped Joe Montana. I mean, they beat him down in the first half of that game, and it's on that old turf and that killer D-line. And that Eagle team, we often forget them because they didn't go to the Super Bowl and they didn't win any. But that defense with Buddy Ryan, it wasn't the 85 Bears, but in some ways it was one of the greatest defenses we've ever seen with Reggie and Jerome and all those guys, and then the scheme and the fact that Joe Montana lit them up and went up top and stood in against the rush and took monster hit after monster hit and still found Rice down the field continuously in that second half. I mean, that was more of like a tale of two halves, but that game was awesome. Just to beat Reggie and Jerome and all those guys, Buddy Ryan in their place after at the apex of whatever they were as a team. That was one of my favorite games for sure. The other ones that stand out, okay, that one for sure. The other one that I was at Texas Stadium when the Niners rolled in as 13-point underdogs in the 95 season. That Cowboy team would go on and win the Super Bowl under Barry Switzer. And the Niners rolled in that night or that Sunday. And I was visiting my buddy in Dallas. And so we went out, the Friday night before and the Saturday night before with all of his buddies. And I knew the Niners were 13.5-point dogs. Steve Young was hurt. Elvis Gerback was starting. And I as I'm flying into Dallas, I'm thinking to myself, I know I'm going out with my buddy and all of his friends. They're all Cowboy fans. And I know they're going to go at me the entire weekend. So how do I want to handle this? I either got to be like sheepish and be like, yeah, you guys are probably going to kick our ass. And 13.5-point favorites. Or I could just be bold and just be like, we're kicking your ass. We're the defending champions. I don't care if it's Gerback. We're rolling in there. We're kicking your ass. You know what I mean? I had to play it one way or the other. And then
Rice house call.
Exactly. So I decided, you know what? I don't care if I'm going to look bad. I'm not going to let these guys talk trash to me for 2 straight nights. I'm going to maintain for 2 straight nights of going out drinking that the Niners are going to go in there. And even though they don't have Steve Young, and even though they're 2 touchdown favorites, they're going to go in there as the Super Bowl champs and they're going to kick Dallas around. So I went with that narrative. We're going to kick I talked so much trash. And I mean, I had guys like betting me. I had like 5 different wagers. I mean, no way. No, and we went out and went to this place called Papados, which is this chain seafood place in Dallas. Huge place, monster. It was like in an airplane hangar. It's the biggest restaurant I think I've ever seen. So we're having this incredible seafood brunch and everything. We wound up paying like $300. We didn't even have tickets. We had to buy them from the scalpers for like $3.95 a piece, which is to this day was like the most I've ever spent on a sporting event is $395. Opening kickoff, Jerry, opening series, Jerry takes one to the house. Then
just like a slant too, or something simple, right?
Slant and go. Goodbye, Jerry. We're walking to our seats, Kyle, and I see the slant. And I see Jerry, and I'm like, he's gone. And sure enough, he was gone. And I had my Niner hat, Niner T-shirt. Have my arms in the air. So the game gets going. Then the next series, Ricky Jackson tips a ball in the air. Merton Hanks picks it off, runs it into the end zone, pick 6. Now the Niners are up 14. Right before the end of the first half, it's like 24-7 49ers. And they get the ball back with like 2 minutes left in the half. And Gerback finds Derek LaVille underneath, dumps it to him. He high steps it into the end zone to make it 31-7. And I remember turning to my entire section of Cowboys fans. At this point, we're in our seats, and I start popping my Niner T-shirt, and I'm like, "Ball game! You guys can all go home. The champs are in town. Not today, And I just start getting pelted with beer, and nuts, and it's a pretty nice crowd. I got to be honest. I mean, it's not the LA Coliseum with the Raiders, or it's not an intimidating crowd. I mean, the Dallas crowd is very, very much, they're playing Donna Summer, and, it was disco, and, it just had a different feel. There was no violence in the air. But yeah, those 2 stood out. And then the other one, when I think about it, is just so amazing. It was such great entertainment. The Andre Bad Moon Rising, Deion Sanders brawl at the line of scrimmage game in the Georgia Dome, because not only did we get to see a full-on brawl where neither guy got ejected,
which today's game would never happen. Like
never happen.
No
never happen. Yeah. We also got to see Deion take one back like 90 yards for a touchdown against his former team in their stadium, doing the whole Deion dance in the end zone. Deion's dance to this day looks pretty cool. I mean, some things like, wear out over time. His end zone dance to this minute would be cool. And I just, that game, just to see the Niners in the all whites on the road, brawling at the line. And it's just, those 3 games stand out. Absolutely stand out.
That's my favorite player of all time. Deion. So
it's incredible.
I remember that. So, like I said, Florida State fan, so it's easy to root for Deion, obviously. But that play that you're talking about, I feel like he started high stepping at like the near 30. And,
right. He was high stepping by midfield for sure.
Yeah, but he's insane. Oh man.
And also, the Niners, Niner fans weren't used to that. The Niners were very businesslike. Other teams danced. Other teams bragged. Other teams showboated. The Niners didn't. And to see them in the all whites, and, everybody was thinking Super Bowl that year. And then Deion was in his prime. It was awesome, man. It was, and then Bad Moon Rising was a great foil. He was a great villain.
Yeah, especially then.
Oh, and he was a terrific receiver, and to watch Dion, play bump and run and jam him at the line, and here these guys are throwing blows at each other, and nobody's calling. They're throwing flags, but nobody's getting ejected, and they're still. I mean, it was pretty sweet. And then the only other memory that the guy that I really loved in Niner history that I just feel like injuries derailed what would have been a more memorable career. And if you'd asked me at the time, I would have said, oh, yeah, Niner fans will remember this guy for the next 30, 40 years. And now he's sadly totally forgotten. William Bar None Floyd. I loved Bar None, man. I met him after a Niner game one time. He was the nicest guy ever, and I just loved the way he played, man. He was like, no holds barred. I mean, he just sold out. Short yardage. I mean, he'd just go full bore. Head down. I mean, the guy was. He came after Rathman, and it's like there've been the Niners. They won the Super Bowl his rookie year, but then they kind of backslid from there. But and they tore up his ACL in a game against the Saints at Candlestick. But I loved me some Bar None, man. Bar None was awesome.
That's another Seminole, man.
Bar none, man. And believe me, I thought he was a big part of the culture change. Bryant Young's going to the Hall of Fame, and we had a chance to talk to him last year. And I asked him about his rookie year. And people remember BY was a rookie starting opposite Stubblefield on that defensive front and made a huge impact. But Bar None was a rookie who started at fullback all year. And both those guys, I thought, had a huge hand in making the 49ers incredibly physical on both sides of the ball.
You talk about the culture change with Dion, like how he was, different. Floyd was a guy who just talked a lot of trash, was physical, but backed it up. So he was good, and he would let you know about it, and that's what him in primetime would be. So I would really wish he would have stayed healthy.
We got this one from Gammon Brown, who donates $5. He says, Mr. Posey, longtime stalker, follower. How is Mr. Krueger able to afford your services? We can still see him living out of his mom's house. Thank you.
He just drops all these Seminoles on me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not living out of my mom's house. Oh, my God. With this one, Nate says Floyd brought a swagger. Yeah. And then also, getting to know Merton Hanks has also been a pleasure of mine. Mert was a good corner at Iowa, 5th round pick as a corner, made himself into a Pro Bowl safety. They don't win in 94 without Mert. He was that meaningful in the head-to-head games against the Cowboys, and he was a tremendous, tremendous safety.
Last offseason, I went back and watched all the Cowboys 49ers games during that time period, and Merton was everywhere, man. He was insane. I don't think he gets enough credit for how many plays he made. And honestly, one of the most underrated dances of all time in any sport. The funky chicken was top tier.
No doubt. We'll finish on this note. BY is going to the Hall of Fame this summer, and I'm so happy because, I don't know about you, Kyle, but I'm not an autograph guy, right? I'm not an autograph guy. I'm not a will you take a picture with me guy. I've just always kind of lived in the moment. I'm not worried about getting something that I can keep from meeting people. But when I was a kid at camp, I was going to Sac State, and they were training in Rockland, and I went out to camp in '94, and I just happened to run into BY in downtown Rockland, and I was getting a sandwich, and it was after practice, and he was in the deli, and I had my Niner hat on, and I didn't even have a pen, but I asked the lady, I said, hey, can I borrow your pen? And I had him sign the inside of the bill of my hat. And it's it's probably the only real Niner item that I have that I really value. It's the white hat with the red bill with BY's signature on the thing. And then this year we had him in studio. I brought that same hat, and I think he signed it again for me. So I got two BYs on the same hat. I just love Bryant Young, man. I love everything about the guy, about what he means as a family man, what he meant as a football player. This guy played 9 years with a steel rod in his leg. I'm so happy that he's going to Canton. And I love the Hall of Fame speeches always because these guys speak from the heart. And there's always more than nobody gets to the Hall of Fame by themselves. There's always a wife, a girlfriend, a coach, a teacher, a mentor, and the speeches are always phenomenal. But I love BY, and I'm so thrilled that he is being recognized. And I thought there was a chance that since he's not a self-promoter, that maybe he would get glossed over. And I'm just glad that he's going in this summer, and I can't wait. And a few weeks from now, we'll get to hear his Hall of Fame speech. Do you have a thought on Bryant Young's career, or Bryant Young, the person, that you want to share with us here? Because I think there's an awful lot of Niner fans that are so excited for him and what he's going to go through here in the next few weeks.
I mean, think about it. So defensive tackle, and at this time, defensive tackles weren't producing like he was. Like he had 11.5 sacks, 9.5 sacks, 11 sacks, had an injury that could have easily put him out for good. Like a lot of people aren't coming back from broken tibia. He not only comes back, but he comes back and is as an all pro and then plays another decade. That is insane, and just kind of tells you about his perseverance and how hard of a worker he is. So that's what I think of when I think of Bryant Young, not the giant neck roll, which is awesome, but just how he kept playing, and he kept playing and producing, which just speaks to him being the 49er legend.
The only thing I don't understand is why the 49ers gave Nick Bosa 97. So now you get these two great Niners who both wore 97. Now, there's not a lot of retired numbers, but man, BY would have been on the list for me. He would have been on let's not issue 97 for a little while and see where it goes. But they decided to give it to Bosa, so they probably will not retire it. But that was an odd move, didn't you think? I mean, it's weird. We'll never see another 80 or another 42 or another 16, but and I know it's football, so they can't retire that many numbers. You just can't. You need the numbers. But that one, if they could do it again, I think I would say, hey, Nick, pick a different number.
Probably. And the only reason why I think Jed York might have talked about this at the time, just because defensive line, like they're going to wear the numbers in the 90s. You almost have no choice but to leave it. Thankfully, it went to a guy who's pretty darn good himself, but I don't think we're going to see another 97 after Bosa.
Yeah. All right, man. Hey, tease what you got coming up this week for Niners Nation. I know you guys are, covering 49er football 12 months a year, and training camp is just around the corner. This is a little bit of the dead time in the 49er schedule, the football schedule. It hasn't stopped us from going an hour and 6 minutes on this Niner live stream, because when you and I get together, we can talk Niner football basically till the cows come home. But give us a teaser. If I go to Niners Nation this week, what am I going to find, or what are you working on?
Yeah, we're going to just keep counting down. Jordan Elliott has a top 10 list where he's counting down on the best individual performances. So you're going to see a few more of those. There have been some obscure ones, but I'm pretty sure you're going to see some Deebo performances land on there next week.
Well, hey, happy 4th of July. I don't know. I'll be barbecuing at my brother's place in Natomas. He always, he's a judge, and he always puts together a pretty good little July 4th barbecue, and who knows what he's going to have going, but that's where I will be. You got big plans for the 4th? What do you got going this week?
Yeah, we're going to watch the fireworks at a little place up the street here. But other than that, just going to barbecue, just going to grill, going to get outside, get some fresh air, man, being around some friends. Nothing too crazy. Sounds good. Hey, good to talk to you. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week. You too, man. Take care. Enjoy your weekend. Do the same.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to